This is part 2 of week 6. I think I put on their lapbooking video. I had that Rain Man moment a few minutes ago, in my first video where I went. Because all of a sudden I could only see the blinking light. I couldn't see the time and I thought, oh, I'm not really recording. Alright, so as I said, Andrew Jackson, James Madison, Thomas Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln, and John Quincy Adams very routinely ignored the orders of the court, which the Supreme Court says in the opinion of this court. Okay? It is very important in the United States that we know the powers of the executive, legislative, and judicial branch. I cannot tell you how important it is. Okay, this happened recently. I'm sorry, a couple of years ago, but still pretty recently with President Obama. He has the power, the executive branch, to make recess appointments. So if Congress is not in session, then, and he needs to make some emergency appointments to the for judges, for federal court judges, he can do that. He has the power to do that as the executive branch. Well, he made recess appointments when Congress, recess appointment means Congress not in session. He made recess appointments a couple of years ago when Congress was in session. He just called them. He knew he couldn't get them passed. He couldn't get them ratified and accepted by the by the legislature. I can't talk this morning. So he just put them through recess appointments. It's kind of like an emergency appointment. Well, when Congress found out about it, they were upset, but they're like, oh, every little thing, because he pushed the bounds on everything. I mean, everything. The amount of czars he had, the amount of everything, he pushed the bounds. They didn't take him up, they didn't get him in trouble for doing that, and they should have. And I remember even hearing on Rush, he was talking about, I can't believe that. He was talking to some congressman, why did you not discipline him for that? They're not allowed to do that. And he's like, well, we don't just want to be troublemakers, every little thing. That is part of our Constitution. Once you do something, it becomes precedent. Not president, but precedent with a C. And when it becomes precedent, then other presidents can come in and do the same thing and go, look, Obama did it, nothing happened, and it can set a precedent. This is dangerous. That was terrible. And judges have the power with court cases to just make all kinds of weird rulings. For instance, in Texas, we made a law that you have to have your driver's license or some form of ID to vote. These are very important votes. We have all these illegal aliens coming in from other countries, not just Mexico, all kind of terrorists, people coming in from all other countries. And you can vote without an ID. You can't get on an airplane without an ID. You can't go into a federal building without an ID. You can't take a tour of the White House without an ID. You cannot. But to vote, one of our basic rights as Americans, you can't have an ID. So Texas said you have to have an ID. Well, the federal court just struck it down and said, no, you don't. Are you kidding me? That's how come Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck get to vote. You see on election polls how dead people are voting, cast their votes, because they don't have to have an ID with the person's name and picture on it, so they vote for that person. So this is a terrible thing. Federal courts are just far overreaching, so it's very important. He's appointing very liberal judges on a recess appointment, which the Congress wasn't in recess. It's very important we hold their feet to the fire on things, okay? There's very important cases we're going to talk about with the judiciary. The first one is Roe v. Wade, and Roe is spelled R-O-E versus Wade, W-A-D-E. All right, Roe versus Wade. What Roe versus Wade did is about 70% of the people still in the United States do not want abortion. Did y'all know that? So the states ruled that there's no abortion. Abortion was illegal. But what the federal government did is they came in and they overturned that and they made it. So here's the states saying no abortion. We don't want abortion. So let's say the state of Texas. Well, when the federal government came in with Roe v. Wade, they ruled that is not a baby. That is just a mass until it's born. It's not a baby. Which they've reversed themselves so many times on that, where maybe a woman's been injured when she had a baby in her tummy, and then they said, okay, you injure the person inside her. Well, when does it become a baby? It's a baby from the minute that thing is conceived. God says, I knew you before the foundation of the world. He knew us before we were in our mother's womb. It's a baby right away. But when they came in and said abortion is law, It outruled all the states' laws, and now the states, even though they hate it, even though 70% of the people don't want it, now the states have to allow abortion. But let me tell you, the Supreme Court really didn't have that power. We gave them that power. And this is what also it's like. If I'm in my house, sitting right here, I'm in my study, so there's nothing on the walls yet because it's our new house, and somebody walks in my house, and he does not belong in my house, and he walks in my house, and I say, and I let him stay. I don't want to hurt his feelings. I let him stay. And pretty soon he takes over room by room by room, and he stays. I own the house, but if I let him stay, and take residence and take over, pretty soon he's saying, I don't want you here, you get out. I'm telling you, and that's what it's like with laws and precedent. We're letting the judiciary stay in our house. It didn't belong here. And we're letting them make all kinds of rules. And if you ever listen to David Barton, most of this teaching comes from David Barton, and you can look up everything that I say, everything that he says. I hope you do. You can go in Religion in the Founding Era and the National Archives, but all of these documents, everything people used to write out in longhand, all of the documents are stored. Everything that's done in Congress is done in the congressional records. Everything is recorded, every single thing. There's nothing that they can do without being recorded. And our founding fathers made sure that it was recorded, so things weren't being done in secret and we didn't know. We know who voted for it and who didn't vote for it. It's very important that we know these things. Okay, so there, Roe v. Wade is when, even though 70% of the people don't want abortion, and abortion was outlawed in most of the states, there was a case that went to the Supreme Court, and they said, this is not a baby before it's born, and a woman has a right to choose whatever she wants for her body. Of course, people that fight for abortion, say that, it's in the cases of rape and incest. That's their thing that they say because they feel like people can't fight against that. But it is not. Hardly ever is that the case. And the woman, I wish I had this information, I didn't mean to talk about this, but the women who started abortion clinics and started Planned Parenthood hated black people and hated Hispanic people and poor people. And so that is why those clinics are in the inner cities. It's on purpose. She wanted to annihilate blacks and annihilate Hispanics. That was her purpose. She hated them. I'll get her name for you, and I'm so sorry it's not on the tip of my tongue. She hated them. That's why it started. So this whole thing about abortion, that is how it started. She hated people, and she wanted to eliminate them. It had nothing to do with a woman's right to choose or rape or incest. Nothing. It didn't have anything to do with that. And it's still wrong, just like thou shalt not murder. If that person did a terrible, terrible thing to you, you still are not supposed to murder them. They're supposed to go through the courts, and it's the same thing. Even in cases of rape or incest, it's the same thing. It's horrific. But that little baby inside you did not do that. So anyway, that's how the whole thing started. Laws should be passed by Congress. That's what Article 1 of the Constitution says. Well, if you're gonna pass a law that says abortion is legal, because Congress said it was illegal, if you're gonna pass a law that says abortion is legal, it should have been done in Congress, never in the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court does not have the right to make laws, and in essence, they were making a law about abortion, and somehow we have let it stand and not challenged it. Really terrible. And like I said, 70% of the people don't want it. They are not a law-making body at all. So we've given them this power. Think about all the national things in our country that have been taken away from us through the Supreme Court that were never laws. And I never put this together till I heard David Barton talk about it. I went, all these major issues was not because Congress passed these laws or didn't pass the laws. All these major issues are because the Supreme Court ruled on them. How scary is that? Praying at football games, for instance, they'll come and say, I can't pray. And usually the schools will back down because they don't want to fight about it. Praying in school, praying at graduation ceremonies. People will get to be valedictorian and they want to talk about God and they're not allowed to. Are you kidding me? They're the valedictorian. Nope, they'll be told they cannot, they have to submit their speech and they cannot talk about that. But let me tell you, if they want to talk about other things, about how the Muslim faith has helped them or whatever, they're allowed to. It's really amazing. Nativity scenes, how you can't have a nativity scene. Remember, there was no separation of church and state. There was only, the federal government may not interfere with church, but never we have to take church out of the government. Never does it say that in any of the documents. Prayer in schools was taken out. Meanwhile, the Congress is the one that printed the very first Bible that they mass distributed, that they made sure was in all the schools. And they said this needs to be in all the schools. The same with Ben-Hur, the book about the life of Christ that Lew Wallace wrote. The president said this should be in every school. Every person in the United States should read this. There's no separation. Abortion, all of this is through the Supreme Courts. Never did they make a law you can't have prayer in schools. So why are we abiding by that? And then the Dred Scott decision.